If you have recently introduced bent over rows in your training routine, this video is a must watch. Yo, what's the crack? Your personal trainer T Talks, changing people's lives for the better through strength and fitness. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the barbell bent over row, what it is, how to do it, and most importantly, whether this is a movement you should be doing right now at your current level of strength. The barbell bent over row has traditionally been included in many time-tested programs designed to build a solid strength foundation. And it's not surprising given the many benefits lifters could reap from a movement that involves huge chunks of muscle mass. Regardless of which variation you choose to perform, either pulling off the floor or maintaining the load slightly above the ground, bent over rows strengthen all of the muscles in the back of your body. Trapezius, lats, rhomboids, rear delts, spinal erectors, glutes, hamstrings, you freaking name it. In theory, this is fantastic. This amazing movement could cure the posterior chain weakness that is so pervasive in today's world. However, there is another side to it. In practice, the barbell bent over row could be of very little help to many regular folks nowadays. Not because of the exercise per se, but because of the very poor physical condition modern society encourages. In the real world, where regular people working desk jobs go to commercial gyms to work out, typically have 1. Little to no lifting experience, 2. An extremely weak posterior chain, and 3. A combination of number 1 and 2. Let me get into the nitty-gritty of barbell bent over rows and why this exercise should not be prescribed in novice programs without the supervision of a coach. The first and biggest issue I see with novices trying to do barbell bent over rows is the inability to first assume and then maintain a hip hinge position. In very simple terms, a hip hinge is a movement where, starting in a standing position, the torso is lowered down to parallel or near parallel to the ground. This bent over action is performed mainly through flexion at the hips and a slight flexion at the knees, without the latter traveling forward. From the side, the shins would almost be perpendicular to the ground. For this to happen, you have to push your butt back as much as possible. However, many people's hip anatomy has degraded over the years due to poor sitting habits, which means that some folks can no longer do a hip hinge with a neutral spine because they lack mobility in several joints. Simply put, this is a body movement that modern humans are gradually losing. So if you're a person who's recently purchased a training program that requires for you to do barbell bent over rows, and every time you perform this movement there is something off, you feel like you're not doing something right, and you even feel pain in your lower back, please pay attention. You need to record yourself doing the exercise from the side and run a quick check form. These are some of the mechanical compensations you might be doing without realizing it. The body is an incredible machine designed to find solutions whenever it is confronted with demands it can't meet. When hip mobility is limited, the body typically implements 2 strategies: excessive lumbar flexion or knees traveling forward. Number 1 puts the athlete's back in a very weak position to pull horizontally or to hold any load for that matter. This global arch in the spine happens because of the inability to flex at the hips while extending at the spine simultaneously. The limiting factor here is mobility. Number 2 could be a combination of limited mobility and posterior chain weakness. Because getting the torso almost parallel to the ground mainly through hip flexion could be problematic for many, a natural solution is usually to assume a more upright position. Despite this compensation, if the glutes, hamstrings, and the spinal erectors are too weak to handle the workload, chances are that the body will recruit other muscle groups to contribute. What typically happens is that the knees travel forward. Now the quadriceps helps you in the exercise. But there is a trade-off. Now the price you're paying is that you have to sacrifice torso angle. The final outcome has nothing to do with your original hip hinge position. Not to mention that your ability to perform a horizontal pull has been diminished greatly. If you record yourself from the side during a regular set of barbell bent over rows and you clearly see that you're doing any of these, you, my friend, are making the second mistake when it comes to this exercise, which is that you're currently trying to do a lift you are not physically prepared for yet. And I know this sounds very discouraging, but this is what many need to hear nonetheless, because this is the reality of the modern world. We lead extremely sedentary lifestyles that make people weak. However, let me make it very clear that I don't have anything against the bent over row per se. I think it is a fantastic lift I do myself quite often. When used correctly, this exercise can deliver great results. I also want to clarify that me being against programming bent over rows for the vast majority of beginner lifters does not mean that I don't want people to overload or train a horizontal pull. It only means that I like novices to consider other beginner-friendly alternatives that anyone can do right from the get-go. The hip hinge in combination with a horizontal pull is such a high barrier to entry for many noobs. In fact, I'm going to offer you 3 exercises that will eventually allow you to perform bent over rows more successfully and safely in the near future. Number 1. Inverted rows. Inverted rows, also known as Australian pull-ups, are a fantastic way to get a stronger horizontal pull without the need to assume a hip hinge. In fact, it's quite the opposite here. You are encouraged to extend at the hip. Mobility is not a factor when you do inverted rows, and you can focus solely on those juicy upper back gains. And sure, bodyweight rows are not the end-all be-all when it comes to horizontal pulling exercises. There are many other options you could choose from. I'm only recommending inverted rows specifically because you'd get the most bang for your buck in terms of body awareness in space and material, as well as portability requirements. Number 2. Romanian deadlifts. The second movement will strengthen your entire posterior chain in general and your lower back in particular. 2 key issues we came across when analyzing the bent over row were that the athlete neither had enough body awareness in space to perform a hip hinge, nor the lower back strength to sustain one. Romanian deadlifts are going to kill these 2 birds with one stone. Lower the barbell only to where you can maintain a neutral spine while pushing your butt back. This is yet another instance where it makes sense to record yourself from the side to determine what your productive range of motion is. And number 3, loaded hip flexion mobility drills. Romanian deadlifts performed correctly and consistently for a long time could contribute to improving your mobility, especially in the hamstrings. So mobility might improve to the extent to which you increase the range of motion in the movement. However, I would still supplement this strength movement with a mobility drill that reinforces a loaded hip hinge at the bottom from a seated position. Focusing on these 3 on a regular basis over the course of several months could yield fantastic progress on your hip hinge form, your posterior chain strength, and your hip mobility. Once you get better and stronger at these 3 movements, then perhaps you could revisit barbell bent over rows. This time around, you'll be in a much better physical condition to face the great demands of this compound lift. The last typical mistake I see among novice lifters is the minimal engagement of the upper back muscles when doing barbell bent over rows. If the goal of the exercise is to overload the upper back, then the forearms and biceps should play a secondary role really. However, beginners tend to have a poor mind-muscle connection with their posterior chain, so that they end up turning the movement into an arm exercise. This is what goes into a newbie's mind. Alright, the goal is to lift the weight from point A, where my arms are extended, to point B, where the barbell touches my body. The cue I use to correct this faulty execution is to get people to think that the whole purpose of the exercise is to bring their elbows as far behind their back as possible. An easy way to figure out the point of contact between the body and the barbell, aka point B, is the following. In a standing position and arms raised forward, I want you to bring your elbows behind your back as far as you possibly can. In doing so, you'll notice that your fists or your hands will eventually meet with your midsection. This is somewhere in between your lower chest and your navel. That's your point B. Once people find out their natural point B, the dynamics of horizontal rowing with free weights are bound to change quite a bit. You will no longer be pulling the weight in a straight line towards you, so no more ineffective bent over / hammer curls or bent over / reverse curls like so many folks do at commercial gyms. Now the trajectory of the resistance shapes into a more diagonal line because you are pulling both towards you and back. This slight angle is the key for you to hit point B consistently during bent over rows. And that's how you grow a bigger, thicker, and stronger upper back with bent over rows. Check out these 2 videos, I think you're gonna like them. Give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to click on the bell to get notified every time a new video goes live. Stay fit, stay strong, peace.